when you're sharing messages and information, you've got to make that information meaningful. If, for example, you have, say, a large network provider and they tell you we've rolled out 10 million miles of fiber this year, that doesn't mean anything. But if you say we rolled out 10 million miles of fiber, and what that means is Doris on the Isle of Scilly can FaceTime her kids, that's meaning. That's because there's a story behind it, and story is how human beings process information.
Welcome to the Property Funder podcast. I'm here today with Verster. Verster, how are you doing?
Not too bad. It's great to be with you here today.
Yeah, no, it's great. Well, for the audience's benefit, we are here today in a new recording studio, as recommended by Verster. We are in the very trendy part of town called Hoxton. I say trendy. Those of you that are in the know probably think that it's a bit old hat now. But if you're of mine and Verster's vintage, this was an edgy and trendy place some time ago. Anyway, Verster, can you just tell our audience, our listeners and our viewers, your full name and the name of your business?
My name's Verster du Plessis, and I'm the co-founder and managing director of Fox&Fifth. We're a visual communications agency based in Cranley in Surrey, and we've got offices in Brighton as well. And we provide in-house video services for large enterprise businesses and other agencies.
And one of those businesses is Avamore Capital. So for full disclosure, we've been working with Verster and his colleague Lawrence for, I'm going to say, probably over a year now.
It's almost a year now, yes. Yeah.
So that must be the best part of 40 or 50 episodes now or recordings that we've worked on together, good and bad. So if you're noticing that the production quality today is a bit more pro, better audio, better video, you can thank Verster for that. It's his vision and his assistance. So yeah, we're excited to talk about that. This podcast is sponsored by Avamore Capital. Avamore Capital is a development and bridging lender based in London, but lending all over England and Wales, lending on projects from £250,000 all the way up to £25 million on bridging, development, refurb and part complete developments. Please visit www.avamorecapital.com to find out more. Verster, we've come out the back of the summer, and so we're obviously back podcasting, and so I'm very pleased to be talking to you now. Can you just tell us a little bit about how about your background? You're obviously from South Africa originally. Yeah. I think you graduated uni 2003. So how did you find your way? How did you find your way to the UK? How did you end up co-founding a media business as you have?
Yeah, so I came over in 2004, so it's 20 years now. So I'm thoroughly anglicised by now. Came over initially on a working holiday visa, intending to just sort of see a bit of Europe, but really enjoyed the UK, enjoyed London, got a job here in the events industry, doing live production video, and from that, a few other jobs here and there, and then eventually struck out on my own. In around 2019, my co-founder Ferdy and I we realized that we were working on a lot of the same projects, and it just makes sense for us to join forces. So in 2019, we decided to start Fox&Fifth, which was excellent timing right before the pandemic, as you can imagine. But it was a little bit of a blessing in disguise, because we were a new business, we were a new agency, and we were quite nimble. So that allowed us to come up with lots of novel solutions for our clients, who all of a sudden had all of these communication needs that they can't service, they can't do, because everything is locked down. So we came up with a few remote recording solutions, remote editing and processes that enabled them to to keep, especially on the internal communication side, to keep the lines of communications going, and the work that they needed to do anyway to keep that done.
Can you maybe elaborate a little bit further? Can you for those of us that work maybe in the smaller business sector, I can picture us having Zoom calls with the sort of 15, 20 staff within Avamore to kind of give them comfort and reassurance. Yeah. How did that contrast with larger organizations, and why could you not do that why could a Zoom call with a CEO not cut it in that situation?
So it did, because that was one part of it. So we did provide a platform for lots of businesses who didn't have that infrastructure ready. So we could very quickly roll out webcasts and webinars that help them to keep the business updated, keep their colleagues updated. But obviously, when you're working with an organization with 150,000 staff all over the world, you can't really do that on a Teams call. So the communications needed to be a little bit more one way. So that would mean webcasting. So you have a sort of a broadcast program running. We would do it as if it's in a live TV studio, but grabbing sources remotely just from people's laptops and phones, etc., mixing it and then sending it out into their internal network, but then doing it in a safe way as well, because obviously a lot of these things are internal communications and proprietary information that they don't want getting out. So there's a bit of technical side on keeping things secure as well.
Okay, right. So I guess the point is the point you're trying to make there, that you didn't want people accessing the webcast who had no business accessing the webcast.
Exactly, right? Because that is, of course, that's always a danger, especially with some of our clients who are sort of large enterprises and have very sensitive information. But also, so like on a Teams call or a Zoom call, when you have someone doing a presentation to a really large audience, it's better to sort of produce it and have the flow go one way, so people can't necessarily chip in and whilst the CEO is in the middle of their flow, etc. But then also post-producing those segments so that it's digestible, because not a lot of people necessarily have the time to watch an hour and a half presentation, or most of it might not be relevant to them. So we would then afterwards snip those up into digestible bits and then distribute those to the appropriate audience.
Well, that sounds very 21st century, very social media era.
Yes.
It's almost speaking to the inability of I think one of the accusations thrown at so the younger generations, Gen Z and below, is that they're incapable of actually sitting and watching something for any prolonged period of time and paying attention to it. So having to be able to snip it up. Were you not tempted, as I've seen the trend is now, where you have someone talking and then you have like a video game beneath that, the half.
Yeah.
And I've got to tell you, it's very effective because
I got to be honest, that really sort of appeals to my ADHD brain to just have something in the background, because you constantly have other stimuli helping to settle things down.
I completely agree with that. I mean, we joke about it, but do you actually think that? Do you think that that's something that you would contemplate putting into play into some of the internal communications or some of the communications you're putting forward, looking into the future, just because actually it is a very effective way of capturing people's attention?
Well, it's a very effective way of capturing people's attention when you're entertaining them, but when you're sharing messages and information, you've got to make that information meaningful, and that's how you then engage those audience. So using the games and the other stimuli isn't necessarily going to work when it's your quarterly results, for example. But what you what you do is you tie that messaging up to something that means something, because numbers are meaningless. If if for example, you have say a large network provider and they tell you we've rolled out 10 million miles of fiber this year, that doesn't mean anything. But if you say we rolled out 10 million miles of fiber, and what that means is Doris on the Isle of Scilly can FaceTime her kids, that's meaning. That's because there's a story behind it, and story is how human beings process information.
Yeah, it's definitely. I mean, as someone who sells, someone who is involved in the selling of items, right? That there's probably no more powerful method of selling than telling us than storytelling, right? That's the that's certainly my experience. And speaking of selling, how did you go about gaining clients or winning clients when you start the business in 2019? So very quickly, very shortly after you locked down. Yeah. How do you go about winning and gaining clients? Presumably you already had existing relationships, but that may not have been enough to pay the bills. So how do you go about securing additional clients to keep the business going in that period?
So initially we were heavily reliant on word of mouth. That and sort of the pandemic did help out with that quite a lot, because a lot of the people that we worked with moved on, because there was a lot of, if you remember, there was quite a lot of turnover in sort of staff, people moving jobs as they were trying to find situations that are a bit more comfortable, because a lot of people found actually working from home is something I'd like to keep doing, and if my business isn't offering that, they went looking for opportunities where they could do that. Or I think a lot of people just found their priorities a lot more, so perhaps reduced hours, flexi time to enable them to spend more time with their kids, that kind of thing. And what happened was that a lot of people that we worked with in our small handful of clients, they then recommended us to where they were. So that for the initial period really helped. So because we bootstrapped this, we had zero capital really, and it was run out of the shed in my back garden for a significant period of time. So our costs, our overheads were quite low. It was really just what we needed to live. And that obviously helped. So after the pandemic sort of subsided, we started using LinkedIn quite a lot. I would just cold message people. I'd do searches and go, hey, this is the service we offer, and had some good responses on that, and then after that we basically started an email campaign where we were reaching out to lots of people, relevant people, and then it just becomes a numbers game, really. I actually really enjoy the sales side of what we do, because I really believe in our service. We've got a great, and there's no better feeling for me than when I do a call with someone and they were just sort of, they don't think they have the money or could afford it, that it might not be in budget. And as we have that discussion, it sort of dawns on them that, they can actually do it, and they start envisioning all the things they can do. It's a very satisfying feeling when that happens. So I quite like that part of the job, really.
Obviously very different industries, so I can sort of see the parallels in that you have prospects, and the key thing there is you just need to maintain the touch points. And sometimes when it comes to sales, it's a bit of an endurance sport, isn't it?
Yeah.
And clearly you're an example of that. The average sale requires, historically, I think this is a historic statistic, requires I think six outreaches before they finally kind of close.
Yeah.
But apparently it can take as many as 12. To get someone over the line. Yeah. So you obviously need to be very persistent. You mentioned LinkedIn. I'm curious to know how effective the sort of the in message can be, because you won't be surprised to know that I get dozens of invitations a day, and I mean, one of the red flags that are always like, if I see SEO, it's like straight to X. There's no way I'm adding, but I do get, obviously I get a lot of people offering podcasting services. I get a lot of people offering marketing and lead generation services, which probably would have looked like similar services to what you were offering.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if you had the response. Some of the responses you had to your outreaches were too dissimilar to myself. How did you differentiate your approach when you were kind of trying to reach out to people over LinkedIn? How did you make your approaches different to maybe someone who's less successful, who maybe is just going through the motions a bit more?
It's about relevance. Is what you're doing and what you're offering relevant to the person receiving the message? Because obviously there is a scattergun approach. It's a number game. You can, and a lot of people just depend on sending out the thousands and thousands of messages. But really it comes down to relevance. Is what I'm offering relevant to what you need now? Because I could have reached out to you, 2 years ago, and it wouldn't have been relevant to you. And there you go. So it's about timing as well.
How do you determine how do you determine whether a lead is relevant? And first of all, I'm talking about method here.
Yeah.
And then how do you craft the right message to the right outreach message on the back of that? What's the level of research you're having to go
we
to?
segment the target audience quite thoroughly. So we would be, for example, our internal communications offering, we would really just look at internal communications specialists in organizations that are of a level that would be looking at, purchasing our services. But then what you can't do, again, it comes back to the whole thing about meaning. If we can't just offer video, say, hey, we do video. Having a specific offering, obviously our number one offering is that we provide the de facto in-house service, and we provide more than just creating the video. We provide the help and support. Anyone who works with us gets a link to my diary, and they can book a call for when's convenient to them, and really just sort of spitball ideas. Can we do video? Will it fit in the budget? That kind of thing. So that service is relevant to, a lot of people. And obviously for a lot, there's always going to be a segment that you miss, but it's sort of targeting that into, who might be interested in that, and then crafting that message aimed at them. But there is a certain amount of guesswork that goes into it. But
and also you can't spend 10 minutes or 15 minutes or 20 minutes researching every single lead, trying to craft that, because you're ultimately you're just never going to have the coverage, right? You're not going to do it manually.
Exactly.
Have you looked at using AI in any way to try and help?
Yes, so we do
target and segment.
Yeah, so we do use AI quite a bit. We've got a business that we work with that helps us with that, and then we craft the messaging around the business size and the roles, and that helps us to provide an offering that is relevant to those people.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that sounds interesting. That's something we should maybe I should be talking to you about that afterwards. But
yeah, absolutely.
that does sound good. I mean, when you and Ferdy set the business up, was it all? Did you always have was it always in the back of your mind that you would become an entrepreneur, a founder of a business, when you were younger, whether when you were a child or whether in your early days, or is it something you sort of fell into after a time?
I think I've always had that in me. As with a lot of neurodiverse people, struggled with authority, which is sort of conducive to wanting to just go strike out on your own. I mean, my original plan coming over was to travel Europe, but then save up some money enough to go and start a business back home in South Africa. Obviously, that got derailed somewhat, but that's always been in the back of my mind. I then had to obviously work because of the visa situations, etc. You can't really start a business until you've got indefinite leave to remain or citizenship. So I had to kind of just slog it out for a couple of years, but it was actually really good because I worked in small businesses during that time, and I was very lucky to get some really good experience of what it means to run a business, the ins and outs of the, just how the accounting works. How do you do invoicing? How do you keep track from when you've got that lead to closing, to, doing the quote, doing the work, invoicing, managing suppliers, how do you bill? How do you figure out what you need to bill for things? How do you value your products? So that was a very valuable teaching, during that time. But I always wanted to do my own thing. And when I started my first business in 2011, it went well, but being just one person, a one-man band, and trying to just do it on your own, you're working in the business so much that it's really hard to work on the business. And when Ferdy and I made the decision to join up, it created lots of spare capacity that I could then pour into the business and grow it and move us forward, where Ferdy worked more in the business, creating the content, because he's the creative genius behind everything that we do. I mean, I always joke I sort of hitched my wagon to his creative genius, because he's the goose that lays the golden eggs. And you do need that, but you also need the person that likes the spreadsheets, which is me, to make sure that we, take care of the costs, and, we've got the insurance, and we got the, the processes and systems is in place to run the business effectively.
And also someone to do the sales. I mean, I guess in an adjacent industry, like say the the advertising industry or advertising agencies, right? They have the creatives, and then they have the effectively the relationship guys, the sales guys, the account execs.
Yeah.
I think fundamentally, you tend to find that people have complementary skill sets. I mean, if I cast my mind back to the start of Avon was about to celebrate its 9th birthday, and I contrast it maybe with some of the other businesses I've founded myself. I found the business that I founded on my own, which I owned 100% of, or my wife and I own 100% of. Exactly what you're saying is that you're essentially working on the business, and you don't have someone to share the load with. You can have senior trusted people and all the rest of it, but fundamentally, they're not going to be as invested in seeing the business succeed in the way that you are as the founder.
Exactly.
I think I had this conversation with someone who I mentor, and he'll know who he is. But it's a conversation also I had with Zahir, which is like, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. You don't go alone. And I think that it's interesting hearing you talk about that. It's almost like it's almost a cliche in a positive sense. I was actually approached by someone who'd started a small lender just about a month ago, and we had a coffee about maybe last week. And he started a lender, having never worked in a lender. Okay, well, we did that, but he doesn't have any money to put into loans, so he's working with high net worths to fund his loans. But he's doing all the origination himself, because it's just him. So he's doing all the origination, he's doing all the execution, he's doing all the asset management. All on his own. And I said to him, look, above all other, he came to me talking about funding because he watched one of the podcast episodes. I said to him, look, your biggest issue is not the funding. I think your biggest issue is that you're doing it all on your own.
Yeah.
Because, and ironically, he's been going a year. He's done 4 deals. I said, I'm going to guess that month 1 you're selling, month 2 you're trying to raise the money for the loans. Month 3 you're completing the loan, and then all of a sudden you're back in the same cycle where, so month 4 selling, month 5 funding, month 6 completing. He said, yeah, exactly that. So he's basically having this constant cycle. So not having a smooth sales journey. I said, it's because you're doing everything yourself. And I said, you're never going to grow. And this guy, he's like, he said he'd done £1 million worth of lending in a year. And I said, well, how much revenue will you generate on the back of that? He said, somewhere between 25 and 35k. And he's got a wife and 2 kids and a mortgage. I said, buddy, it's not sustainable. You can't do this. So I think it just goes to show how important it is to have other people around you who can carry the load.
Yeah.
Because if this chap had been working with someone else, then whilst he was selling or fundraising, the other guy could do something else. Then they could, guy or girl, whatever. You probably go 4 times as far and 4 times as fast with 2 of you pulling in the same direction. Yeah. So it's fascinating. Fascinating to hear your experience, Verster, around that. So apologies for the waffle. But and in terms of growing the team, so when you started COVID era, how did that work? Were you using kind of subcontractors, paying people on a kind of on a gig based basis?
Yeah. So our industry is, we're quite fortunate that you can scale up and down if you know how to, very, very easily, because a lot of technical crew and creative crew are freelance and they prefer to work freelance. So what that does is it enables us to just scale up and down as needed. So a little 2-man team can do projects of enormous scale because we just get the right people in, and it also helps us to be quite nimble, keep our pricing fairly competitive because we haven't got the massive overheads, and we also haven't got the massive overheads of big studios, etc. Because one of the advantages of COVID is everyone's set up at home, so you're not going into a sort of Soho edit post-production facility, renting out studios for thousands a day. Your people do it remotely. And if you've got your systems and processes in place to make sure that whole project pipeline runs smoothly, you can do it very, very effectively. So a lot of thought went into how do we do that, because you can get a lot of friction that way. Because obviously it's great when you're sat in the edit suite next to someone, you get instant feedback. When you're doing it remotely, that's not the case. So we figured out a workflow and a pipeline that actually enables that kind of work as well. And to make sure that we can always deliver, having a cloud-based collaboration system, that means if person X needs to go, or something overruns and person X needs to go to a different project, then person Y can jump in, access all of that immediately. He's got all the notes, all the feedback, and then just run with the project. So that helps keep things quite smooth. It's something we developed during COVID for when, if someone gets sick and they can't work, that obviously creates an issue. But we found it incredibly useful even later down the line, because it gives us the flexibility to say to a client, give us feedback when you're ready. If you want to make changes or do a different version a month down the line, that's fine. We can do that. You don't have to be so rigorous with, you've put X amount of time in the studio on that day, and if you don't give us what we need by then, you pay a cancellation charge, that kind of thing. So we can be a bit more nimble, a bit more flexible. Yeah.
Do you think that nimbleness gives you an advantage over some of your sort of larger, more established peers?
Absolutely. It gives us a massive advantage.
How would you contrast, like if you were to compare yourself with a bigger competitor, how would they approach some of these situations compared to how you have?
Well, so for us, we're not one of the big contrasts is that we do micro projects, anything from a few £100 all the way up to a few 100,000. So like, multi-episode brand series up to like a quick little top and tail piece of crisis comms for a business that had something the CEO has to say, sorry, we found out there was fraud and we're fixing it, So there's that wide scope, and it gives us the flexibility to just go, right, you want to, I can just bill you for that time. Whereas larger agencies, larger organizations with lots of overheads find that very hard to do. So they'll want to just do bigger projects. So you need to do, and they want to own the entire process. So our nimbleness gives us the opportunity to just fill in the gaps in your resources, because lots of businesses have their own capacity in-house now. And there's no need for you to pay us to do something you can do yourself. And we'll even help you to do it yourself. As you found with Avon, we constantly help you to produce things better yourselves, so that when you hand it over to us, we can then provide create the best possible product. So we help people to self-serve as much as possible, and then pick up where you don't have the resource, and that becomes just very cost efficient. So on our rates, etc., where we're not the cheapest, we're not the most expensive by a long stretch, but because you're not paying for things you can do yourself, it becomes quite cost efficient. And sometimes it produces a better product as well, because you know your business, you know your service, you're going to get the messaging right, you know what you want to say. We can just help you to say it.
Yeah, when you were talking, I was thinking about larger agencies as well, and wanting to do the big projects. And it's not that they won't do the small projects, but they wouldn't do the small projects. But I guess there's probably an element of they'll probably charge more than double probably what you would charge, and then they'll probably stick the most junior, least experienced. I mean, basically the client outcome there's probably not going to be as good, because just the amount of care and attention is not. They're not going to get the benefit of you or Ferdy. They're going to get the benit or Lawrence. They're going to get the benefit of someone who's
a 22, graduate,
23, sort of who's going to cut corners and things like that. So that makes a lot of sense, actually, for sure. And in terms of headcount, how many people are you now as an organisation?
So we're 5.
5 full-time.
5 full-time.
But I guess if you include subcontractors and
subcontractors, then we're about 30. Yeah. So we do scale up and down as needed. We've got some exceptional talent, and the advantage that we have with subcontracting and using freelance people is we can put the right people on the right job. So, for example, if we're doing automotive stuff, we've got people who have worked on Top Gear, who have extensive experience doing filming cars on racetracks and everything that involves. So, and if we're doing, say, finance or banking, we've got people like editors with an economics degree. So we can really put people on the project that has the relevant knowledge and experience to produce the best outcome. Okay,
that makes a lot of sense, and it sounds pretty smart. And I guess as you grow as an organisation, the specialties and specialisms will continue to grow as a consequence of that. And then I guess in terms of what's your vision for the next 5 years for the business? Like where do you want it to go? What does that look like for you?
I'd say our vision for the future. It's a tough one, really. Because a lot of it comes down to what works. We do a lot of market testing, a lot of new products, a lot of new services specific to industries, etc. But I think sort of branching out more in the communications field as well, and then really tapping into AI, because AI is where the future is going to lie, especially for video. It's gonna change the whole industry. So for us, there's a measure of finding the best ways to utilize AI to provide a really good service for our clients, but then also exploring areas that would be a little bit insulated from AI, like the live event side of things. You can't really replicate that with AI. There's a measure of technology that can smooth things over, but there's still an element of human labor that's going to go into that. So these are the sort of areas that we're looking at.
Yeah. So you kind of you want to have an element of the business that has a sort of an AI moat.
Exactly. Yeah. So you want to sort of our strategy really is, on the one hand, shielding us a little bit, but then on the other hand, really deep diving. And so our team, each one of us, we have made a commitment to do at least one working day of working on AI, whether that's research, testing, even if it's just playing around with tools, etc. And then on every Friday, we have an AI knowledge call where we share what we've learned, what we've found, just to keep pushing. And because it's such a rapidly evolving field, and if you don't keep up, then it can run away very quickly and you've missed the boat.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. Working in the real estate industry, I think for the most part, people are kind of Luddites, and it's definitely a big laggard behind so much of the rest of the world. I mean, you're working in marketing and video. Yeah. I mean, we've seen some of the deep fakes. I know you like Rogan as well, and you see some of the. Have you seen some of the spoof the spoof Rogans? I mean, it's just quite. I see them chopped up on Twitter. It kind of makes me laugh, and I'm like, what? He didn't say that, did he? Really? So yeah, and I think Rogan finds them quite funny, but I think deep down, I think he might be a bit disturbed by it.
Yeah.
What do you think is the biggest lesson you've learned in the 5 years since you and Ferdy set up Fox&Fifth? Like, what would be your biggest takeaway?
There's so many lessons. I suppose it's never as good as it seems, and it's never as bad as it seems. When you're running a business, there's good times and there's bad times, and I think the most important thing is to not get caught up in either, because there's always a way to fix things or to improve things. But also, when you're flying that high and you're having a couple of really good months, keep it in check, because you've still got to put in the time. You've still got to chase those leads. You've still got to make sure that stay on top of your billing, stay on top of your marketing, stay on top of your processes, because the moment you ease off, then things can go wrong. So I think that's the biggest lesson I've learned, really.
Do you think within your space, we observed one of our competitors was acquired by Alaka Bank in the last couple of weeks, and I've been banging the drum about consolidation in the specialist finance sector for quite a while, and we have seen some isolated instances of it, but it's still not. I think maybe the economic environment for the last couple of years has made it more challenging, but I still maintain that I think it's a thing. How do you feel about consolidation within the media, the wider media industry? Do you think, like, for example, would you see yourselves as potentially being an acquisition target, or would you look to go the other way and acquire other businesses that you could bolt on and give you complementary services? I mean, how do you assess that landscape, having been a bit of a veteran in the space now?
So there's lots of that happening, lots of consolidation happening at the top end and at the lower end. So you the big marketing and creative agencies, the ones with all the anagrams, the WTS, RRP, or it's meaningless to anyone who doesn't actually work in the industry. They all, they're consolidating, and they have been for a very long time. We're starting to see that at the lower end, sort of the smaller businesses now, as well as as people want a more one-stop service.
And more vertically integrated.
Exactly. So, you want to go to your agency and say, I want you to do my website, I want you to do my social media, I want you to do my outreach, I want you to do my video, I want you to do, and they've done that, but like a lot of bigger agencies are trying to gobble up smaller bits. We've been approached a few times, but nothing that would really make us move. But our vision is really to be the ones acquiring eventually, and pick up businesses that miss the spot. But what we then do, because there's such a need for that, what we offer other agencies is to be that sort of in-house video service for them, so that we say to them, well, you don't need to buy us. We'll provide you that service, and with enough room so that you can mark us up, because we charge half of what the big agencies do. So you can mark us up and use us without spending all that money. So we keep our freedom, and they get what they would have anyway. So everyone kind of wins on that.
Yeah, I guess would it be safe to say that maybe sometimes the managing directors or the CEOs of those companies that are approaching you, they want to do the acquisition more of an ego stroke rather than as a logical business decision?
Exactly, because what they would spend on acquiring us wouldn't be worth it. It would be years before they recoup that, and really, there's no need. What they'd get is expertise and everything, but they could get that anyway. So it just wouldn't, like you say, it's a bit more of an ego thing to say they have a dedicated video department. So really what we're doing is saying, well, we can have that anyway.
I would challenge that actually, in the sense that I suspect there's an element of 2 + 2 = 5 about it, in the sense that if I was in a media business and I was in acquisition mode, I'd look at someone like yourself and I'd say, okay, well, obviously you can fulfill the roles that you do within the services that you provide, but actually the benefits of having the people in your team, like I'll just use you as an example, right? You say, well, actually, the relationships that you can leverage for them. Yeah. Well, actually, is that act as an unlock for both of those businesses? So that there is, there's sort of, so it's complementary. Yeah. And it works to advantage. So, if someone was looking to collaborate or be acquired, what would be on your shopping list, and what's stopping you from going out and hiring or acquiring?
So a shopping list for us would be, first of all, really what you touched on now, which is relationships, getting a foot in the door, and expertise in the business.
But what specific expertise? Like what expertise that you currently couldn't offer it as successfully as you currently do, for example?
On the communications side, people with a strong background in leveraging contacts in the industry or in the sort of enterprise level,
basically
clients, larger organizations that can sort of filter into what we're doing, but then it needs to be a complementary service to what we're doing as well, because with some areas there just isn't a lot of crossover.
Going to change direction a little bit,
okay,
but still very very much focused on your business, which is what's the one thing that SMEs could and should be doing in terms of their video content that they're not doing at the moment?
Consistency. And it's the hardest thing to do. Consistency is the hardest, but planning, having a strategy, because it's easier than ever, because with AI tools you can punch it. Well, no matter what business you're in, if you're a plumber or a taxi driver or whatever, you can punch that into ChatGPT and say, this is what I do, create a content strategy for me for the next year, and it will with a bit of finessing, it will spit out, something that is usable and is a place to start. And then using video, because video is the most effective communication tool. And all the statistics and all the research shows that out, that video trumps everything else. People are attracted to moving pictures, and especially with smaller businesses that tend to be more personal businesses. If you look at your accountants, your solicitors, it's about the relationship that you have with that person, because you're depending on them to make sure you stay out of jail. And just video helps you to create that sort of personal feel, so people feel that they get to know you because they see you, and they start to get a feel for your personality, and it then makes them more comfortable working with you.
What would you say to people who feel nervous about putting themselves out there? That people who are uncomfortable going and going and put themselves out there, whether that's on LinkedIn or whether that's making and creating video content or audio.
It's
content,
hard. It is hard. But there's loads of information out there about how to do it and how to present yourself, etc. You can just Google it. There's loads of even YouTube series on it. But then practicing, and then, because you're never, like with anything, the first time you do it, it's going to be a bit naff. It's going to be it is going to be cringe, as the kids say. So it's going to be awkward, but the more you do it, the more you're going to get comfortable with it. It's just practice, really. So the best time to start is right now. Just do it. Even if you're just sharing it with your mates on WhatsApp, to practice until you get to a point where you feel, I suppose the second point is don't be too self-critical, because it is always going to feel horrible when you watch yourself back, but most people won't see it that way. So my answer is just do it. Just do it.
You must have very supportive friends on WhatsApp, in their WhatsApp groups you're in.
I don't know. They burn me. No, they make no mistake. The comments are not fit for broadcast, shall we say?
we whether we like it or not, we've been slapped with an explicit rating, so we may as well take advantage of it, right? So no, I think that's right. I mean, from my own personal experience, just doing the podcast, for example, that. If I contrast the early podcast episodes and I think it's one of those things that the more you do it, the better you get. You probably have some appreciation of Gary Vee. I've followed Gary Vee for donkey's years now. Maybe not all the way back to the beginning of Wine Library TV, but he talked about, he was one of the first people on YouTube, and he'd do these he'd do these wine reviews back in 2006, and with a video quality that I imagine would make Lawrence blush, and he I think he sort of lovingly refers to it as like a sort of Afghanistan hostage video in terms of the appearance. I mean, maybe that's not appropriate these days to say that, but I think at the same, if you think about it, he's continually just practice. Yeah. And I think that one of the things that we've tried to drum into the Avamore team, particularly those that kind of have a front of house role, is you need to continuously put yourself out there. Yeah. Keep putting out the content. We've obviously got Kim here, and I think Kim works very hard to try and get people's faces out into the market. But I think ultimately a lot of the team still are reluctant, and I think it's a really big advantage across all industries to become, at least in your own little world, to be a bit better known.
Absolutely. So if that's something you're struggling with your people, getting them to really put themselves out there, it really helps to provide a structure for them, because a lot of the problems people have with content creation in general, but video specifically, is thinking, okay, what am I going to say? Where am I going to start? So if you do a lot of that work for them, if you say, right, if you've closed a deal, do a video that says, hi, give them almost a script where they fill in the, my name's from Avamore Capital. We just signed this deal. we're so happy, end up close, get in touch if you want to. And then once they've done that a few times, they go, oh, okay, that, you know, I feel a lot more comfortable with this. And then they'll start to ad lib and run with it and make it their own. But providing that structure to start off with sort of gives them, it's training wheels you're giving them until they learn to cycle.
Yeah, I mean, it's really funny because, you know, I would see a bit of an embodiment of the benefits of putting myself out there, because I was on holiday in Cyprus a few weeks ago, and I was at the sort of tennis club having a hit with my son, and this guy comes up to me and says, "You're Avamore, aren't you?" I was like, yeah. I was like, yeah. I'm really sorry, I don't know who you are, but nice to meet you. And you know, it turns out he worked for a competitor and knew some of our senior management.
Yeah.
But you know, I think it just goes to show I think we are so lucky. Yeah. I think we're so lucky in the day and age that we're in to be, you know, to have these platforms to really project our voices and project ourselves out into the market. And you know, I've been a bit, my head's been very down. I've had my head down, trying to resolve a few situations within the business the last couple of months, and obviously we've had the summer break from the podcast. So I've not been putting myself out there and put myself forward as much as I would ordinarily. But you know, we have this great opportunity to amplify ourselves. You know, we obviously, you know, you can only have one coffee at a time. You can only have one lunch at a time. You can only have one phone call at a time. Yeah. But with social media, you can amplify your voice and your presence, you know, a near infinite number of times over compared to, you know, to traditional methods of outreach. So, you know, I think it's actually, it's almost, this conversation's almost redoubled my motivation to really, really push the message that I want to send, but also making sure that the people I work with are pushing their messages as well. You mentioned ADHD, or you mentioned neurodiversity.
Yes.
I know there's something you wanted to talk about today, as we've discussed off camera. You know, I have at least two neurodiverse children. I have a wife who now believes she has ADHD, I get, as we talk about chats in WhatsApp groups, I've been called names by my friends that would imply that might suggest maybe even I have a degree of neurodiversity about me. Do you want to just talk about kind of do you want to just give a bit more background in terms of how important, I suppose, not just being open to, you know, working with people with neurodiversity, but also, you know, how it affects you and your wider family?
I have ADHD. I was very lucky. My mother's a psychiatrist. My stepdad's a professor of pharmacology. So they were able to identify the issues quite early, which, you know, for the 1980s South Africa was very lucky, very fortunate, because as you can imagine, even though I had, you know, that sort of diagnosis and that identification, the support and understanding wasn't quite there. Not known as the most tolerant place and time.
What late 1980s South Africa?
Yeah.
So I find that very surprising.
But I was very, very fortunate to have that and have that support as someone with ADHD help me to sort of navigate life, but there's always going to be an element of you know, a different path, shall we say, and I think the neurodiversity piece, the ADHD, is part of the sort of entrepreneur drive.
Do you think for example, the hyper focus that you can have as as someone with ADHD, you think that's a bit of a superpower at times?
Absolutely. It really helped me because I went down, when it came to sort of the video disciplines, I gravitated towards video editing, and the ADHD really was a superpower there because I could hyper focus, and I would I would go into the edit suite and come out, and it would be 2 days later, and not realize I hadn't gotten up, I hadn't, and obviously as you get older, that's not more difficult, it's a bit more difficult from a physical standpoint, but it really was a superpower, like you say. But there is that sort of strive for independence, and I think that's why when you mentioned, the suggestion that you might have ADHD as well, I think a lot of entrepreneurs have ADHD because of that. There is that sort of drive for independence that comes with it.
Yeah, I think, although I don't think I'm not sure I have ADHD. I think being attached to my phone for as long as I have been probably makes me appear like I have some ADHD type presenting symptoms. But I wouldn't want to demean those people who have who do actually experience it. What would you say the downsides? Like, what's the downsides for you having ADHD? Like, where are there particular tasks that you find really difficult? For example, is it if something's not interesting to you, you literally it's like you're almost allergic to it?
Yeah, having so directing your interests to things that are fundamentally uninteresting is a monumental challenge, and keeping up with creating systems and processes that help you to tackle those is very, very important, but it's something you've got to stay on top of. Just staying organized, looking after your health, because there are, things that make it worse. So if you're tired, if you're not eating right, if you don't get exercise, it makes it worse. Whereas when you keep that structure in your life, you keep that pillars and foundations right, then it's a lot more manageable.
Yeah, my oldest son, he hasn't got ADHD. He's got mild autism, and Ed Psych suspected also ADD rather than ADHD, and he's a very talented athlete, very bright boy, but what we notice is that if he's he loves gaming, but if he spent he just came home from boarding school for the first after his first week there, and Sunday he literally just spent the entire day in a darkened room gaming, and then and then
you got to peel him off the walls.
It was like it wasn't far off of like the gremlin giving gremlins water after midnight type of thing. It was it's not a it's quite difficult to try to explain to him. When I say not difficult, I'll try to explain to him and he'll get it. But if he'll get it if he's well rested, well watered, well fed, and he's had the sunlight and exercise. It's very difficult to have that conversation with him when he's on the back end of an 8-hour gaming marathon in a darkened room and not had any exercise or sunlight. Yeah. It's a very different type of conversation.
Absolutely. And as we discussed before, I've got 2 children, both ADHD and autism. And one of the biggest things that make their lives difficult is overstimulation and devices, screens, phones, tablets, etc. I don't think people understand how incredibly overstimulating it is. And then it is, like you say, it's like the gremlin. You almost can't control them. So we're almost, from the outside, it seems very harsh how we run our house, but we have to sort of keep that structure. It's almost like military discipline in our house. So, no phones, no tablets. The kids can have like gaming and stuff for limited time, an hour or 2 on the weekends. And on school holidays, we bring the tablets home, but then, some games, but no YouTube, we keep that very, limited. And at first it was really hard when you put those rules in place. But as time goes on, and my eldest especially realized that, I'm actually not feeling so bad all the time, because he used to beat himself up quite a lot. Why am I like this? And I think there was a measure of that with me as well when I was younger, before someone had explained the sort of the traits of ADHD to me, where you think, well, I'm just a washout, like I'm just a terrible person. And then, it gets explained to you that now actually the impulsiveness, the, distractibility, that kind of stuff, it's all part of the ADHD, and it's something you can control. Same thing with him. I sort of explaining these concepts to him, and he sees the result of it, accepts it a lot more. But it also improves his life. He can learn, he can, participate, be a bit more social, etc.
Well, what I think is, I think with Benji is like, if we, the summer holidays, an 8-week summer holiday was very, it was, my wife wanted it to be deliberately very unstructured.
Yeah.
But I think, ironically, it's that lack of structure is really stress. It's really it's really bad, and I think that they need what the structure gives them is they don't have the downtime where they do gravitate towards tablets and phones and the devices. I mean, how old are your kids now?
So 11 and 7. Yeah. So
not too different to mine, but Benji, like literally 2 days before he was due to start boarding school, he was in my wife's bad books in a major way, because he couldn't sleep, and so he came downstairs, got his phone, and then was watching reels until 4 a.m. And we went downstairs, and I was like, Benji's in bed, but his phone's not charging on my desk. He's come down and got it. So you go into his room and then like peel the covers back. You see he's like, and his phone's in the bed, and my wife has all these things she has to do with him, and so she's like, get up, and he's like, and then I just said, I think he's been watching his phone all night, and so then I go on the screen time, and I see like there's like a bar, there's like a time bar at 4 a.m. Like goes all the way to it's like you're working out like. He basically just finally gave up the ghost about 3:30 in, and oh my God, she went and hit the roof. She went really crazy, but like just like so upset. But I just it's like genuine poison for these kids.
And I'm a firm believer in structure for children. I think that the worst thing you can do to a child is to give them what they want. You've got to put boundaries in place, because it gives children the confidence that someone's looking out for me. It gives them a bit more certainty, and I think something that is quite a challenge for children is parents wanting to be their mates. So I always say to especially Christian, my eldest, that I'm not your friend, I'm your dad. You can have lots of friends in your life, but you're only ever going to have one dad. It's my responsibility to make sure that you are ready to become a man. And once you've learned to take care of yourself, then we can be mates. Then we'll go for a beer, and then we'll be best buds. Up until then, if you're not angry with me, sometimes I'm not doing my job, because I'm not challenging you enough to take responsibility for who you are and the man that you're going to become. So it's something that's as an immigrant to this country, I think it's my responsibility to not raise a whiny washout. And
was that what you call in South Africa, deuce?
Well, I couldn't possibly say, but no, and one of the things I found most satisfying is seeing how he responds to the challenges. So, like for example, over the summer, I said to him, "From now on, it's your job to mow the lawn." And he thought he could.
That sounds very Stephen R. Covey.
Well, possibly. But he thought he could never in a million years do it. And I said to him, "That's absolutely, just try, just go and do it. I'm right here to help you." And it was obviously lots of complaining and I can't do it. And by the end of the summer, he gets up on his own on Saturday mornings, goes and gets the lawnmower, fills it up with petrol, does the weed whacking and, comes back in and, See, the more responsibility you add on, the better they respond to it and the more the better perception they get of themselves, because they start to find their own competence, especially at this age, this young, when they're sort of entering into teenage years, when, it could be, it's very easy to become helpless and have people do stuff for you all the time. Creating that sense of competence of you can do it, you just need to try it. It might be a mess at first, but it's fine. No one can, no one is born knowing how to put a roof on a house. It's something that you learn.
Yeah, I do think, I think it's a great idea. And I think I certainly think that if I compare the stuff that I was doing around the house to help my parents and I contrast it with my own kids, they, like my kids have never washed my car, for example, and I think, well, I used to ask to wash my parents' cars, they weren't always that keen because I didn't do a very good job, but that's a different story. Sometimes my help created more work for them, but it's through making those mistakes that they get that extra experience.
Yeah.
I know. Just privately, you're obviously someone who's got you're someone who is quite committed Christian. Your family. Sort of, I say family values, but traditional values, should we say? How do you, as someone with children, how do you go about helping them navigate an increasingly complex world?
That's a tricky one. We focus on spending a lot of time together as a family. Meal times are sacred, so spending time together around the table, talking, having discussions, because that you have the best conversations whilst you're doing something else. If you sit your kid down and go, talk to me about X, Y, and Z, exactly, they just, but chucking a ball around, having some food, sometimes, just playing together on the Xbox or whatever. Sometimes we even do that, or going for a walk. That helps you have those conversations. And, I try to instill our values in our children, more from a fundamental point of view of, what it means to be a good person and, how to approach life with a well-structured way.
Well, I think it sounds like something that we can all, doesn't matter what sort of faith, denomination or background you're on. These are sort of key principles that probably we can all follow and benefit from.
Yeah.
That's great. I suppose we've obviously spoken about your family, but outside of work and outside of the family, you're, kind of, what are the things you like to do to let off some steam? I mean, we can start with maybe your favourite form of smoked and grilled meats.
Well, I am an avid smoker of meat.
You would have your South African passport removed, I imagine, if you weren't, right?
Yeah, I once we were hanging out with a few friends and I called it a barbecue instead of a braai.
Oh my goodness.
I know, I was almost instantly excommunicated.
They're revoking your citizenship right now. Yeah.
But I do enjoy the American style of smoking meat, and the style of cooking, something I enjoy quite a lot.
Are you someone who's got the patience for a brisket?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. No. Absolutely.
What's your tip? What's the how do you get brisket right?
Time. It's time. time and constant temperature.
How do you get that temperature right? How do you affect that temperature? Because I've my one attempt at brisket, I left it for a couple of hours and it went from 100 degrees to 150, and then I had a nice inch, like an inch layer of meat juices where my brisket was, and I knew that was not a good thing.
Equipment's important, and constant monitoring. That's part of the fun, really, sitting around drinking beer. But yeah, like being able to, like just monitoring the temperature internally. There's lots of tools out there now that you can. But it used to be really hard to, constantly go, when you open the grill, the temperature drops, but you need to measure the internal temperature, etc. Whereas now you just have probes you put in. I mean, even like some of the fancier grills have the probes built in, and you just dial it into the machine, and it just does it all for you.
Feels like cheating, doesn't it? That's. I've got a meter. I've got a meter probe, but I don't have anything else. You what about? Dare I say it? Do you ever look at doing some good veg on the barbecue, or is that sacrilege?
I've done chicken, which is the same thing, really. But no, we do. Yeah, every now and again, we'll, when obviously having the time for the brisket it's a rare occurrence. I try to do it like at least once a year.
Yeah.
Usually towards the tail end of the year, so around December, which is a good time to do it. But it is hard to sort of find that time regularly. So when we're doing just a regular type of barbecue, then I'll put some a few peppers and courgettes and things on, create like a Mediterranean style thing.
So it's exactly what I do. So that's good. Yeah, good to know. And then aside from cooking meats, you like your sports. I know you like NFL, but I guess you must be a rugby fan as well.
It's funny, I was a big rugby fan, and then I discovered American football, and the reason really was around 2009-ish. I was quite poor, and I couldn't afford Sky TV, but I could afford the NFL Game Pass. And I'd been playing the NFL game on the PlayStation and started to learn about it. And I saw the Game Pass for it was like £100 a year or £80 a year or something like that back then. And I thought, well, I quite like this. I can afford that. I can't afford Sky, but I can afford that. And I kind of just lost track with the rugby completely. Like when South Africans talk about, the Springboks, I'm like, absolutely. Oh, yeah. But I have no idea what's going on. I don't even know, most of the players anymore. But I kept up with the American football and really like it. It's a great sport for watching. It's also a great sport for just hanging out with your mates, because it's 3 seconds of violence and then 10 minutes of standing around. So you can watch the action and go back to drinking beer with your mates. So it's quite enjoyable, and it's obviously very strategic. It's very systematized, and it's all about statistics. So that sort of appeals to my my preferences. So
I guess it's one of those things that if it was something you weren't interested in as someone with ADHD, you'd be like, that would be a bit of an anathema. Like Marcus, my son who's got ADHD, like he's like he's not remotely interested in it. He's like, no, it's not for me. Not for me, Dad, thanks. Whereas if it's a Marvel movie, it's a different story. Yeah. And do you have a team? The team you follow?
Yes, the New England Patriots. So
I suppose when you started watching, I guess that was
that was sort of exactly. That was peak Brady. Took a dive somewhat after he'd left, and with Bill Belichick departing, it was end of an era. But at some point, that has to happen. Although we got a nice draft pick, so fingers crossed we can make some progress this year.
Well, we'll I guess we'll see how it plays out. We can geek out privately about NFL as we go, because I've been watching it since the mid to late 80s.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
My stepfather was did a postdoc at Ohio State University, so he brought the love for it back. So
Do you have a team you follow?
I'm a Bears fan, which means that I'm a long-suffering Bears fan.
Although we'll
see.
We'll see. Did you watch Hard Knocks?
I haven't actually. I haven't.
You should. Yeah,
I will. I will watch it. But it was a bad season. So.
Yeah, but Caleb Williams, I think he could be.
He looks. Well, we'll see.
We'll see. Yeah,
we'll see. Cool. So, look, just as we're going to sort of wrap things up shortly, but kind of closing question.
Yeah.
If you were to kind of give some self-talk to your younger self, I'm going to say probably when you're finishing uni, just before maybe you come to the UK, like what would you say to like knowing what you know now? What would you say to yourself and why?
Have kids younger.
Okay.
One of the most fulfilling things I've done in my life was to have children, and I think the idea that children are a burden that is sort of, propagated throughout society these days is something I came to learn is absolute nonsense. It's no greater joy. And it's given me purpose. It's given me structure. It's, I would have had children a lot younger. And more maybe, but it's surprising how big a part of you that becomes, being a parent, being a father, fulfilling that role. It just makes you become a grown-up, I think.
Yeah, I can relate to that. I mean, I was 28 when I had my first, so and with 3, there's still occasional questions from the wife. I was like, no, I think we're done, but I certainly have no regrets for when we started it. Starting early was definitely something that I would say works for me. So that sounds good. Verster, it's been a pleasure. It was obviously great to meet you face to face as well, and always enjoy your company anyway, whether in person or on Zoom or Teams calls. If anyone wants to reach out, maybe get some tips, maybe wants to work with you and your team, what's the best way for them to reach out?
There's a contact form on our website, fox&Fifth.com, or you can reach me on Twitter @Verster, or just look for us on LinkedIn.
As everyone knows, I'm Michael Dean, and you can find me on the internet @property_funder. I am on X, but I don't really post very much these days. Instagram, LinkedIn, and we have this show has got a TikTok as well. So hopefully I'll be posting a little bit more, especially after some of the tips that Verster's given us here today. But without further ado, thanks very much, Verster, and thanks again to April Capital, our sponsor, and we look forward to chatting to you more over the coming months as we go up to the Christmas period. All right, thanks very much.
Thanks for having me. Bye.